This is John Gilroy from the Federal Tech Podcast.
This is George Tees with Elastic.
Today, we're going to talk about intelligence analysis and data visibility. Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is George Tees from a company called Elastic, E-L-A-S-T-I-C. But first, I would be remiss if I did not tell our audience that we are recording this at Ford's Fish Shack in lovely downtown Ashburn. Why here? I think everyone listening knows that 70% of the world's internet traffic goes right through Ashburn, Virginia. What better place to talk about intelligence analysis and data visibility than a restaurant right across the street from one of these biggest data centers in the whole world? Before we begin, George, tell us your title and what you do at Elastic, and maybe give a thumbnail sketch of what Elastic is all about.
Yep, sure. So I am the Vice President for Solutions Architecture for Public Sector, so I'm responsible for the engineering for all of public sector, including state and local and the intelligence community. Elastic is a data platform. We help our customers provide data analytics, data visibility, regardless of where the data lies, so that they can get very thoughtful insights into the information, that they can use all of that data that they're storing to actually provide them actionable intelligence.
George, my previous guest was a gentleman named Emile Monette from a company called Synopsys. And in the break, he said, "Who's up next?" And I said, "Oh, we got a company called Elastic." He goes, "There seems to be a surge of information or interest about Elastic." He goes, every time he turns around, someone's talking. He says he thinks they use Elastic. He says, it's just like, well, is everyone using Elastic and no one talks about it? Is this a big secret or something? Or what's going on here?
Yeah, so it's great. Is Elastic has its roots in open source. So that's where it originally came from. So a lot of the technologies and a lot of the platforms that you see today are based on Elastic. Things like Uber, things like large-scale data platforms are based on Elastic. Since then, we've actually evolved that platform to actually supporting our enterprise customers with very, very large data scale very quickly, so that they're able to actually index petabytes of data in milliseconds, so that they're able to provide and actually tease out of their data actionable information. So that one of the big reasons why we're seeing a lot of growth in this conversation is customers looking for a platform that is open ecosystem, something that's easy to use, something that has a lot of basis behind it. So we're seeing a lot of customers looking at that so that they can provide data insights quickly to their actual analysts.
You know, there's a conference associated with the company. It's called Elasticon. In fact, I think they have a public sector Elasticon, don't they? So if you're interested in this, one time a year, they bring in all the founders of the company, and they sit down, they go back and forth with the audience, and it's the AMA, Ask Me Anything. I mean, it's just a fantastic company, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a fantastic company. We've got our focus on our customer base. Even at Elasticon, as you mentioned, we had 5 or 6 of our key customers actually up there presenting and having conversations about how they're using Elastic to actually either do supercomputing or geospatial or detailed data analysis. So at the end of the day, Elasticon and the company is really focused on the public sector community.
Okay, let me state the obvious. You know, in the last few years, the federal government's made a strong transition to the cloud. There are some silos out there, but we see this thing called the hybrid cloud. Now, the challenge, I think, for data analysts is getting information from multiple sources. And so the obvious problem is that, are you using all the sources? And the second most obvious problem is that this information is changing all the time. There's more and more of it. And so Elastic seems to play right into this suite of problems, doesn't it? So tell us about Elastic and tell us about intelligence analysis with Elastic.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. There are kind of 2 key problems that we kind of see with our customers across the board. One is data visibility. That's a major issue for our customer. The other one is data analytics, and basically where that information is stored and who has the ownership of it. So when you look at that, you're looking at it from I have data in multiple stores. Right, I have data that's in 4 or 5 different locations, 4 or 5 different databases. Instead of having to pull that information back, we need to help our customers, understand that data, analyze that data, and provide insights to that data where it sits. So we see a lot of our customers today For years, the prevailing kind of approach was around doing the analysis in kind of this utmost secret environment using proprietary data platforms, very large external teams and bringing people off in that walled-off strategy. And in some instances, that's actually very beneficial, right? In some of the intelligence community, when you're looking at visibility, when you're looking at data analytics, sometimes it makes sense to have this very customizable platform. But I find with a lot of conversations with our customers, in most instances, it actually provides a better approach when you start to look at one that's rooted in transparency, flexibility, collaboration, and it can offer benefits that are more aligned to the mission across the board for customers. So as you look at our customers, they actually have their mission data, they have all of their information data sources, and there could be hundreds of them out there, right? I'm sure DHS probably has, 30 or 40 different data sources that they can take and correlate together and taking that information. Then you put analytics on it. And then they have things where to your point is, we want to look at where things are in the cloud, where things are on-prem, where things are in private cloud. You can't define to a customer, A, where their data stores are, or B, how they're going to consume it, whether or not they have multiple data stores or whether or not they want on-prem, they want it in a FedRAMP cloud, or they want it in a private cloud.
George, I did an interview 2 weeks ago with a company, and we talked about tiered storage for 30 minutes. I mean, that's just this one. Let's just take, okay, George, let's take one little piece of the paper here, and we'll look in the corner here, and then, oh, by the way, we have hybrid clouds, we have private clouds, public clouds, we have on-prem, we have silos, and then we have tiered storage and all of those. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, this is like taking a complexity factor and multiplying everything. Okay, and by the way, multiply by 3 now because you have to understand exactly. You can't, George can pull from that. No, he can't pull from that. But that's the same. It's the same cloud. Yes, it is, but there's certain things that by the way, Claude can pull from that, but he can't pull from that. And so it gets to be, okay, just gather all the information you can. Well, no, wait a minute here. It gets to be a complex problem.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a great point. I think at the end of the day, it's a very complex problem we're trying to solve. But the key piece that we're trying to have a conversation with our customer about is it can be very simple and very straightforward. Having multiple data sources does not mean it needs to be complex to pull those data sources back. It does not mean you even need to pull those data sources back. You can actually do the analysis where the data rests. So you having tiered storage, that gives customers the ability to use cheaper storage, frozen storage, all sorts of kinds of things associated with that to either reduce costs or to actually make the data align and be able to actually analyze the data quicker. So while it is a complex problem we're trying to solve, that's one of the key things that we're seeing with our customers is when you have this flexible platform, when you have a platform that can actually take in that information, correlate that information without having to have 100 different people in there helping you develop the back-end applications for it, it becomes something that's easier for customers to implement, and within a number of days being able to actually implement a data security process and adding insights to their data.
There's a podcast in town called Feds at the Edge. And I know Feds mostly in the Washington, D.C., but there are a lot of Fed. In fact, there are sensors in many areas. In fact, the Department of Agriculture, I'm sure, has sensors all over the place collecting data. And I think if you study what's going on in agriculture, this stuff is changing all the time. Mm-hmm. And so it's not only, okay, George, sit down in the corner, gather all these resources. It's like, okay, George, gather all these resources while you're presenting your report. And so the flexibility is not in just one aspect of gathering, but the flexibility is being able to modify that data as you're trying to draw conclusions, because the ag stuff's going to change every 30 days, for maybe every 15 days, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I think when you start to look at different missions, so imagine this challenge. So, Department of Homeland Security, they have ICE, they have U.S. Coast Guard, they have 17 different agencies in there that have different missions and different information that they have. How great would it be to actually take all that information, correlate that information so that across DHS they can see it? This is what we're doing and what we're accomplishing in there is we're taking these multiple data sources instead of having to pull everything back. Why don't you add the insights and the analytics to the data where it resides in CBP's data store, analyzing it in ICE's data store, but the actual insight information, the analysis actually can come back so that everybody can use that. You can share it across the entire agency, and more to the point, you can share it across agencies so that you can actually let USDA, you can let other people know that there are challenges that are being seen out in the infrastructure.
I've been taking notes as you speak, and when you said frozen data, I wrote down glacier.
Yeah.
Glacier. Yeah. Was that frozen? No, John, different. My mind associates these different words. It's so funny. I always like to talk about the intelligence community, and they handle a lot of sensitive data. So part of the story is companies talking about sensitive data. And at the public sector Elasticon, there are companies, there are organizations from security agencies that talked about that and how do you secure the data. Just because you think you know all the sources of information in order to make an analysis doesn't mean you do. There's this concept called dark data, which means that, okay, in any given agency, whether it's, intelligence service or not, you may only be visible to maybe 1/3 of what's out there, or even less, maybe 11% in active use. So how does Elastic handle the situation where, okay, we're giving you all the active data we have, but that just tells 10% of the story?
Yeah, so there's a lot that can actually go into that. At Elastic, we use machine learning and AI infrastructures, AI ops, to actually add more context to the information. So while you may not have all of the data that's there are things that can be extrapolated about the existing data that can provide end users the ability to understand where to take those next steps. Past that is we also provide the ability that we can help with that dark data, right? Because we don't care if the data is structured, unstructured, geospatial. If you don't know where it is, there's not much we can help you with. But if it is a different type of data, you have different types of data stored in different types of locations, utilizing different types of infrastructure. Taking a single platform that's open and actually has an open ecosystem to actually take that information, provide AI, ML, machine learning, vector searching to that capability and to that data could be critical to our customers.
Well, the big elephant in the room is ChatGPT. I think if you walked into a gas station, they'd be talking about ChatGPT. If you walked into Ford's Fish Shack and the restaurant here, they're talking about ChatGPT. And I think what the conclusion is that if artificial intelligence, well, the way it works, it gathers information from a data set, let's say Google. That doesn't mean that all the information on Google is going to be valid or accurate. And so it may be pulling in inaccurate information. And so when people are trying to make decisions and they're trying to do data analysis, it could be that they're pulling in information that could be deliberately deceptive.
Sure.
So all of a sudden is, okay, we're pulling all this stuff. Okay, we know what the dark data is, What about the data that's not accurate? It's deliberately not accurate. I mean, this gets to be some subtle questions here.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. You see ChatGPT and these others come to market. They're everywhere. It's becoming quite commonplace to have AI and machine learning. And a lot of that is around how you build the models around AI and machine learning. Right? At the end of the day, having a lot of false data, that is one of the biggest challenges that any data scientist will actually talk to you about is the information that's in there and finding the falses, the negatives that are in that data set. And that's a lot what you train your AI models and your infrastructure to do is understand those inconsistencies and the invalid information that's in there. That's one of the bigger pieces that are utilized to actually take AI models, make them better, is to continue to feed back that training loop so that they understand and can identify that false data, and it gets better over time.
Let's talk about automation. I'm always afraid of automation, but there's a lack of cybersecurity engineers out there. There's just a lack of talent in general. When it comes to the CHIPS Act, they're looking at 50,000 people are trying to find who can design chips. They just don't have them anymore.
Sure.
And so where does Elastic fit in with this concept of automation?
Yeah, so great question. So as I talked about earlier, we are integrated into an open ecosystem. So we have partners that are out there that we integrate in for the SOAR capabilities, for full automation capabilities. But to your point as well, we actually have a shortage of people to actually help with the cybersecurity challenge, visibility, data analytics. And one of the great things about what we provide and what can be actually executed with data is providing very quickly actionable information to the end user. So actually filtering, to your previous point, is filtering out some of those negative or false positives and providing the most relevant information to the end user very, very quickly so that they can take action quickly. So imagine if you have 5 analysts, instead of giving 10,000 events, you can give them 2 events, or you can give them 10 events that actually have. That's how you actually help with the workforce problem, and then taking that one step further, integrating into the automation platforms that individual agencies and companies will use.
When I think of automation, I think of old-fashioned factories and people working on the line and different types of suppliers and everything else. When I did my research on Elastic for this interview, I stumbled on this phrase. It was limitless ingestion. I said, no, wait a minute. I mean, no one can do limitless ingestion. Maybe a 300-pound guy eating pancakes can do a limitless ingestion, but is this a phrase that can be applied because Elastic, because it can be so flexible and adjust ways to structured, unstructured data, stuff from satellites, stuff from farmers. I mean, railroad tracks have sensors on them now. So does this phrase limitless ingestion apply to you guys? Really?
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that are great, to your point, there are sensors everywhere now. There is data about everything that's out there. You've got to have a platform that actually has very high-end ingest, can actually correlate the information very, very quickly. So our ability to reach out and take the information that's out there is not limited. Right? We look at this, we have petabytes worth of data. We have very, very large customers taking very, very large government data sets and actually ingesting that data daily. And we're talking about petabytes of data that's coming in daily to actually ingest that. So when you look at this, you almost have to have an endless or a limitless ingest pipeline so that you can support these data models moving forward.
You know, before the interview began, we sat and talked about Ashburn, Virginia, what it used to be 10, 15 years ago, what it is now. We're right across the street from a massive data center here. I don't think 25, 30 years ago people could have predicted how much it's changed out here. I think it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the federal government in the next few years. Do you think there's going to be repatriation, people moving back from the cloud into data centers? Do you think there's going to be people going back on-prem? Or this is an analytical question for you in the next 5 years, because you've been in the business a while, you've seen what's going on. Are people going to say, well, it costs more than we thought, and move back? So what do you think the transition is going to take in looking back 15 and forward 15 years?
Yeah, let me give you two answers to that. One, which is what I firmly believe, working with the federal government. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing for the past 25 years is I love the federal government. I love public sector and their mission. It impacts real objectivity and helps our customers. I think it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether or not customers are going to go to the cloud, they're going to go to hybrid cloud, they're going to go to on-prem. At the end of the day, we as data companies have to look at this. We have to support it across the board because our customers are going to make choices that are best for their business, and we've got to be there for them, and the company is committed to making sure we support that. The second answer to that is I do believe for certain use cases that we will see customers pivoting away from cloud for very specific use cases. Do I think that there'll be a wholesale shift off? No, I do not. I think that cloud is here. Cloud is a force multiplier for our customers, for them to be able to store this amount of data, have this amount of information, and run the amount of compute that they need to against that data.
Well, George, you don't have a dog in this fight, but I'm going to throw you in the fight anyway. There is a well-known analyst named David Linthicum. Doesn't live too far from here. And he just had a book come out. He's a wonderful guy. He says that this whole concept of repatriation, moving away from the cloud, has got nothing to do with the data. It's got to do with the enterprise architects and setting up the move to the cloud. And so I would think that enterprise architecture has got to be one aspect to consider when you're looking at intelligence analysis and these wide-ranging data sets as well. So that could be a factor here in the next 10, 15 years too, couldn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely could. And when you start talking about data analytics, visibility, a lot of the work does happen up front. You have to architect the system initially to be scalable so that you can support the amount of ingest, you can support the amount of data sources. So the enterprise architecture needs to take that into account kind of across the board so that when you're architecting the platform, and to my point, and I think a little to yours, is individual use cases will have individual different requirements that they actually want to look at.
We are recording this on April 12th at Ford's Fish Shack in lovely downtown Ashburn, and probably air in a week or two. But this morning, I saw a notice from CISA, and they released version 2.0 of their Zero Trust strategy.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw that or not, but it was a big deal in the community, and I went through it. And it seems like every couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, there was a national cybersecurity strategy that was released. There's more and more types of requirements for compliance. Do you think this is going to limit the federal government's ability to make progress with cloud transition, or do you think it's really going to make an impact? It seems like at one point in time, we got to get away from the 5 pillars and get into work at the data center across the street, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think we to your point, I think we do need to kind of get out and actually execute on the business and actually executing on the mission at hand. I do believe that a lot of these strategies that are being released are critical. They're critical to provide the governance for the agencies on what they need to execute on, provides them guidance on what CISA and other larger organizations are actually seeing out there. So I do believe that it actually provides provides a significant amount of structure for federal agencies and for federal CIOs and CISOs to go forth and execute on.
I guess it's better than hints and intimations, and this is how another agency did it. It does list some specifics in that document, and I thought the national cybersecurity was of course, much more ethereal, much more strategic. So we're going to end up this interview with a prediction. Next 5 years, Elastic is going to be, it's everywhere, it's everywhere, it's everywhere. What's going to happen to Elastic in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I think Elastic has got nothing but on the upside. I think at the end of the day, data is growing. The need to actually execute on the data, the need to facilitate collaboration and agility across data platforms so that people can share information, people can share the output, and they're not getting locked into infrastructures is very, very critical. I think the actual look at data analysis and actually looking at how data is shared across the board, I think is critical. I think there is for Elastic having an open platform, having a platform that can integrate with an open ecosystem, having the amount of ingest speed and capability we have, I think at the end of the day, the data, the analysis, the visibility that we can provide across the board to our customers is critical in all the different dimensions, whether or not structured, unstructured data, cloud, on-prem, hybrid cloud, having those across the board. So I think at the end of the day, we're just starting the journey with Elastic into the public sector environment and actually helping our customers take their data and provide more actionable information around that data.
And if you'd like more information, you can, of course, go to the website, Elastic, elastic.co. But there's a webinar coming up. Is it a webinar? Give us more details about this.
So we actually have a webinar coming up on April 27th at noon called 5 Ways to Make the Most Out of Your Mission-Critical Log Data. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? But I know that a lot of federal agencies have logging requirements, but how do you take that information? You're logging it for one piece, but what are you doing with the log? How do you take that information and actually provide something out of that data? But that's the intent of the webinar on the 27th of April.
And if you're in your car listening to this or walking your dog or something, I will put the link in the show notes so you can attend on the 27th. Is that right?
Yes.
Great. Super duper. We're running out of time here, unfortunately, George. You've been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, George Tees, Vice President, Solutions Architecture at Elastic.
This is Emil Monette from Synopsys. Listen to episode number 64 of the Federal Tech Podcast to get a handle on understanding open source security, the CHIPS Act, and Black Hawk helicopters.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.